My boyfriend of 5 years told me he wasn't ready for engagement, then I discovered he already proposed to his coworker with the ring I had paid for. I didn't confront him, but showed up at their engagement party with the receipts. It started one seemingly ordinary Friday. Jake and I had just celebrated our 5-year anniversary at Nobu, where he'd gripped my hand across the table, swirled his Cabernet, and told me how glad he was that we'd grown together. That night, I fell asleep with my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling lucky. Looking back, I should have recognized the hollow sound. 3 days later, while scrolling through Instagram on my lunch break, I saw a post that made my stomach drop to the floor. It was Christy from Jake's office, the one he'd mentioned in passing but always described as just a colleague, showing off an engagement ring. Her caption, "I said yes to forever with my soulmate. Engaged." And future Mrs. Jacob Williams. I stared at that photo so long my screen dimmed. The ring looked eerily familiar, a 1.5-carat oval diamond with a pavé band. Exactly like the one Jake had casually pointed out at Tiffany's last month when we were just browsing. The same one I had secretly gone back to purchase the next day, dropping $8,000 from my savings after he mentioned how much he'd love to get me something special someday when I was ready. He wasn't ready for marriage? Interesting. Especially since, according to Christie's post timestamp, he'd proposed to her just 48 hours after telling me over pancakes that he needed more time before taking that step. I sat there, coffee cooling beside me as reality crystallized. The pie ring I'd bought was never meant for me. Updated. OMG, I didn't expect this to blow up overnight. I've been reading your comments while stress-eating Cheetos at 3 a.m. Many asked if I checked bank statements. Yes, and what I found makes this even worse. Have you ever discovered someone's betrayal wasn't just emotional, but financial too? Jake. And I met at a charity gala in 2018. I was there representing my marketing firm. He was supposedly a rising star at Barrett & Hughes Financial. He approached me at the bar, made a joke about the terrible canapes, and somehow turned a conversation about stale crackers into exchanging numbers. Our first date was at a hole-in-the-wall Italian place where he impressed me by ordering in perfect Italian and leaving a generous tip. I was charmed by how he seemed different from the finance bros I usually met. He talked about his family in Minnesota, his rescue dog Baxter, and his dream of starting a foundation someday. When he moved into my condo after a year, I was thrilled. He insisted on paying half the mortgage, but always seemed to have some reason why his transfer was late. First, it was a bank error, then a temporary account freeze due to suspected fraud. I covered him, of course. What was money between partners who were building a future? Last fall, Jake mentioned wanting an expensive Breitling watch. He'd comment whenever we passed jewelry stores, pointing out exactly which model he liked. "That's what success looks like," he'd say, admiring the $7,500 price tag. He knew I'd just received a substantial bonus from landing the Henderson account. "Imagine how good that would look on me at the Simpson presentation," he'd say, referencing an important meeting that would supposedly determine his promotion. So when he showed interest in that ring at Tiffany's, I thought I was being clever. I'd buy it secretly, he'd buy the watch, and we'd surprise each other with the perfect symbols of our commitment. I used my American Express, arranged to pick it up later, and felt excited that we were finally moving to the next phase. The saleswoman Melanie was so happy for me, even snapping a picture as I completed the purchase for their customer stories. 2 weeks later, when I gently brought up our future over breakfast at our favorite brunch spot, Wildflower Cafe, Jake looked uncomfortable. He stirred his coffee slowly and said, "I'm just not there yet, babe. Marriage is a big step, and with everything at work right now." He trailed off, reaching for my hand. "You understand, right?" I did understand. I understood I was being played. After discovering Christie's post, I went full detective mode. I requested our financial records, checked our shared account, and reviewed my credit card statements. The pieces started falling together like a sickening puzzle. Those occasional work dinners that ran late, all at romantic spots like Oro or the Terrace, places we'd discussed visiting together. The weekend conference in Chicago, there were matching Instagram stories from Christie at Navy Pier during the exact same dates. I found evidence that Jake had been withdrawing exactly $250 every week for months, not enough to raise immediate concerns, but substantial over time. When confronted about these withdrawals in the past, he'd claimed they were for networking lunches or client gifts. Now I realize they were likely funding his double life with Christie. The worst discovery came when I found an email confirmation for a couple's vacation to Bali, booked using my airline miles but with Christie's name on the reservation. They were scheduled to leave 3 weeks after their engagement party. He'd been planning to use the frequent flyer miles I'd accumulated through years of business travel for their romantic getaway. Still, I didn't confront him. Each night he'd come home, kiss me on the cheek, ask about my day, and tell me about his. Every word out of his mouth was now suspect. Did his boss really praise his work on the Reynolds account? Was there even a Reynolds account? When he mentioned being tired from back-to-back meetings, was he actually exhausted from planning his engagement to another woman? I maintained the performance, smiling over dinner, watching Netflix documentaries side by side on our couch, even having sex when he initiated, all while methodically gathering evidence and planning my next move. I discovered the engagement party was scheduled at the Westmont, an upscale venue downtown, for the following Saturday. I found the invitation while searching through his desk drawer, an invitation he'd obviously never intended for me to see. Each day was an exercise in restraint. I wanted to scream at him, throw things, demand answers. Instead, I smiled, nodded, and pretended nothing was wrong. Because I wasn't just angry, I was strategic. A confrontation in our kitchen would give him time to create more lies, make excuses, maybe even turn things around on me somehow. But evidence presented in front of everyone he knew? That would be undeniable. Saturday arrived. Jake left early, claiming he had an important client meeting that couldn't wait. He kissed my forehead, said he'd be back late, and suggested I order in and have a relaxing day to myself. How considerate. I spent the day preparing. I had my hair blown out at Dry Bar, splurged on a makeup session at Sephora, and slipped into a red Reformation dress I'd been saving for a special occasion. I organized my evidence in a sleek black portfolio: bank statements, credit card receipts, screenshots of their not-so-secret rendezvous, and most importantly, the original receipt for the ring, complete with serial number that would match the one on Christie's finger. The Westmont was decked out with white roses and champagne fountains when I arrived at 8 p.m. I gave the hostess my name. I'd RSVP'd under Jake's special guest, and walked into a room full of people celebrating what was built on a foundation of lies. I spotted them immediately. Jake in a navy suit I'd helped him pick out for his work events, Christy beaming in a champagne-colored dress, her left hand conspicuously displayed to showcase my ring. Their friends and family surrounded them, raising toasts to their future, completely unaware of the fraud they were celebrating. I waited for the perfect moment. It came when Jake's father clinked his glass for a speech. When Jake told me he'd found the woman he wanted to spend his life with, I knew she must be special, he began, his voice warm with pride. And when he showed me the ring he'd saved, he choked up a bit. I knew how serious he was. That was my cue. I stepped forward into the circle of guests, portfolio in hand. Saved up for? I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. That's interesting, because I have the receipt right here. The room fell silent. Jake's face drained of color as he recognized me. Christy looked confused, glancing between us. Jake, she said. Who is this? I'm his girlfriend of 5 years, I replied calmly. Well, I was until I discovered he proposed to you with the ring I paid for. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jake stepped forward, hands raised. Babe, this isn't what it looks like. Save it, I cut him off. I turned to Christy. I'm sorry to do this at your engagement party, but you deserve to know who you're planning to marry. I opened my portfolio and handed her the Tiffany receipt with my name and credit card information clearly visible. This is the purchase record for that exact ring on your finger. Note the date, March 15th. I bought it after Jake pointed it out, thinking it would be for me someday. Christy's hand flew to her mouth as she studied the paper. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with tears and confusion. I continued, addressing the stunned crowd. While he was telling me he wasn't ready for marriage, he was planning his proposal to Christy, using my money, my home as his base of operations, and I turned back to Christy, apparently telling you a completely different story about his life. Jake was in full panic mode now. I can explain, he started, but Christy cut him off. Explain what? She demanded, voice cracking. Explain how you told me you were single for 2 years before meeting me? Explain how you said this ring was a family heirloom reset with a stone you chose? She twisted the ring off her finger and stared at it like it had turned into a snake. I wasn't done. I pulled out more evidence. I also have records of the weekly cash withdrawals that funded your dates, the airplane tickets to Chicago booked with my frequent flyer account, and I looked directly at Christy, the Bali reservation for your honeymoon, also using my miles. The murmurs in the room grew louder. Jake's mother approached me, face ashen. Is this true? She asked quietly. Every word, I replied, handing her copies of the statements. I'm sorry you're finding out this way, but I thought everyone deserved to know the truth. What happened next was chaos. Christy threw the ring at Jake, hitting him squarely in the chest. Her father stepped between them, looking ready to throw punches. Jake's mother was crying while his father stood shell-shocked. Friends were whispering furiously, phones were out. This would be all over social media within minutes. Jake finally found his voice. This is insane! You're making me look like some kind of con artist. I laughed. Actually laughed. If the shoe fits, wear it. Though you might have to return those Cole Haan loafers I bought you last Christmas. Security arrived, summoned by the venue staff as the situation escalated. I handed Christy my card. If you want to talk later, call me. We probably have a lot to compare notes on. As I turned to leave, Jake grabbed my arm. You've ruined everything, he hissed, his charm completely evaporated. Do you have any idea what you've done? I looked him directly in the eyes. I've done exactly what you taught me, Jake. I invested in my future. Updated. Y'all, the aftermath has been wild. Jake's mom called me crying. Apparently they'd loaned him $20K for a business investment that was probably funding his double life. Christy messaged me asking to meet tomorrow. I'm bringing wine and documentation. Would you meet with the other woman if you were in my shoes? The following days unfolded like a bizarre dream. My phone exploded with texts and calls from unfamiliar numbers, friends of Christy's, Jake's family members, even coworkers from his office who had witnessed the destruction of his carefully constructed house of cards. Jake himself alternated between rage-filled messages. You had no right to humiliate me like that. And pathetic attempts at reconciliation. Baby, we can work this out. What we had was real. I blocked his number after he showed up at my office, causing a scene that required security to escort him out. My boss, Diane, was surprisingly supportive. If he can lie that convincingly for 5 years, imagine what he'd do to our clients, she said, approving my request to work remotely for a week. Christy and I met at a quiet wine bar across town 3 days after the party. She arrived with red-rimmed eyes and a folder of her own evidence. Over Malbec and shared trauma, we pieced together Jake's elaborate double life. He'd been seeing her for 18 months, telling her he was a senior investment manager who had recently moved back to the city after working abroad. Every detail of his life story had been carefully tailored to match hers, even claiming to be from Minneapolis when she mentioned growing up in St. Paul. He told me his condo was being renovated, which is why we could never go there, she said, twisting her napkin. I guess that was your place. Our place, I corrected bitterly. The one where I paid the mortgage while he contributed sporadically at best. I showed her the spreadsheet documenting his missed payments, over $30,000 in the past year alone. The most painful revelations came when we compared timelines. The weekend he'd gone to visit his sick mother, he was with Christy at a B&B in Vermont. The nights he was working late, split between wooing her at intimate restaurants and actually working late-night shifts at a high-end bar, his real job, not the fictional finance position he'd constructed. He doesn't even work at Barrett & Hughes, Christy said, showing me a confused email from their HR department responding to her query. He bartends at the Reserve 3 nights a week and does some kind of commission-based sales the rest of the time. The truth was both devastating and liberating. Every foundation of my relationship had been fabricated, yet confirming that freed me from questioning my sanity. The gaslighting had been so subtle, so masterful, that I'd ignored obvious red flags for years. 2 weeks after the engagement party, I received an unexpected email from Melanie, the Tiffany sales associate. She'd seen a social media post about the incident and recognized my name. I'm so sorry this happened to you, she wrote. I remembered you were buying it for yourself and was confused when a man came in claiming to be you to pick it up. He had all your information and ID, so we released the ring to him. I froze. Jake had impersonated me to collect the ring. That wasn't just emotional manipulation. It was fraud. My attorney confirmed this converted our situation from messy breakup to potential criminal case. When I mentioned this to Christy, she revealed that her family's lawyer had already been consulting with the district attorney's office about pressing charges. Jake must have sensed the legal walls closing in. He disappeared from social media, stopped responding to anyone's messages, and according to his roommate from the apartment he actually lived in, another revelation, packed up and left without forwarding information. The last I heard, his father had received a text saying he needed some time away to clear his head. Meanwhile, my condo felt emptier but lighter without his presence. I'd donated his remaining clothes to Goodwill, changed all my passwords, frozen my credit reports, and begun the process of financial disentanglement, closing joint accounts, removing his name from utilities, and documenting every fraudulent transaction for my attorney. The strangest outcome was my unexpected friendship with Christy. What started as comparing notes on our mutual deceiver evolved into regular coffee meetups and eventual genuine connection. We even started a private social media group for women who'd experienced similar betrayals, providing support and warnings about financial red flags in relationships. Within weeks, it had over 300 members, each with their own story of manipulation and fraud. If I hadn't seen you walk into that party with your portfolio of evidence, I might be married to him now, Christy said during one of our meetups. You saved me from so much worse than a humiliating engagement party. We saved each other, I replied, realizing it was true. Without discovering her, I might still be writing off Jake's temporary financial setbacks and banking errors for years to come. 6 months later, I received notification that Jake had been arrested in Arizona. He'd apparently tried the same scheme with a wealthy widow, who recognized him from the warning post Christy and I had created that had gone viral in certain circles. The charges included fraud, identity theft, and several counts of financial exploitation. His plea deal required full restitution to both Christy and me, though his assets were so minimal that we'd likely see pennies on the dollar. The psychological damage couldn't be quantified in any court judgment, but there was satisfaction in knowing his con artist days were finally numbered. The ring was returned to me after being held as evidence. I sold it and split the money with Christy. We both agreed we wanted nothing connected to Jake in our lives. I used my half to fund a tropical vacation, posting photos from the Bali resort he'd planned to visit with her. Petty? Perhaps. Satisfying? Absolutely. Our support group continued to grow, eventually developing into a formal nonprofit organization focused on financial literacy and detecting relationship fraud. I became its first executive director, leveraging my marketing skills to build awareness and educational resources. Christy joined the board, bringing her actual financial expertise, unlike Jake's fictional credentials, to help create practical tools for protecting personal assets. Last week, I received a friend request from someone claiming to be Jake's ex, before me. Her message was eerily familiar. Same charm offensive, same mysterious banking issues, same gradual financial drain. I wish I'd known about your group 3 years ago, she wrote. It might have saved me from losing my inheritance and my self-respect. I've learned that red flags look different when you're wearing rose-colored glasses. That financial intimacy requires as much trust and verification as emotional intimacy, and that sometimes the most important investment you can make is in your own sense of truth. As for me, I'm dating again, cautiously. My financial advisor suggested a prenuptial agreement template for our website, which I've bookmarked just in case. Baxter, Jake's supposedly beloved rescue dog, turns out he belonged to a friend who was traveling abroad. Like everything else, in Jake's life, even his pet was borrowed to create the perfect image. The only thing that was real was the lesson I learned. Trust should be earned slowly, verified regularly, and withdrawn immediately when violated. And receipts, both literal and metaphorical, should always be kept. Updated. This will be my final update on this saga. Jake's sentencing was yesterday, 18 months plus restitution. Our support group now partners with 3 domestic violence organizations to educate about financial abuse. That red dress from the engagement party? I wore it to my promotion celebration last night. Would you have confronted him privately first, or did I do the right thing with my public reveal?